Shalom Ashpaka, greetings to you in the name of Yahusha HaMashiach to all the 12 tribes who are scattered to the ends of the earth. This morning I was watching a video of a Jewish singer. He calls himself as Rabbi Tobia, and through his grammatical interpretations of the Tanakh, all right, he, says that Yahusha is not the Messiah. They are looking forward for a Messiah to come, and he shows grammatical proofs, okay, from Tanakh to show, to deceive people. So much as so that many of the Christians, I read the comments on that video as well. Many of the Christians and pastors also are, converting themselves to the Jewish faith, forsaking Messiah. And it is a very sad state that this is happening because it is affecting a lot of people across the world. So I thought that after watching the video, I will look up what the guy says on one particular verse. In fact, there are many verses he quoted, but one particular verse where he discredits uh, and says that this is not Yahusha over here, but it's talking about YasharEL as a suffering servant, is from YashaYahu, that is Isaiah chapter 53, verses 8. So I looked up a literal rendering. If you see over here, my screen, uh, it talks the text is from YashaYahu chapter 53 verses 8. So the first verse here I've listed is without the vowel points, and this is the Masoretic text. Okay, and this is the literal rendering of the text from the Masoretic. All right, it says, "From oppression and judgment he was taken, and his generation who considered, for he was cut off from the land of the living, from the transgression of my people, a plague or a strike was upon lamo." All right, this lamo in grammar, Hebrew grammar, means them. All right, it's plural. So that's how they interpret. The rabbi says that it's not talking about Messiah, who is one person, but the nation of YasharEL, which is them. Okay, so the word in question is lamo, which the Jewish rabbis, through literal grammar, translate it as them. So obviously, Tobia also had a rabbi under whose guidance he learnt all these things, and now is taking a teacher's position as a rabbi and teaching people. Okay, and there are lots of followers of his. So, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the truth from scripture. So the issue is lamo is a poetic form of lahem, all right, which means to them. But in poetry, which is Hebrew poetry, lamo can sometimes function as singular to him when referring to a collective noun or a representative figure. This won't make sense now, but when I take you through the verses, all right, it will make sense. Okay. So this ambiguity is why translations differ. The plural sense, for the transgression of my people, the stroke was upon them. So this is from the Jewish press, all right, which is termed as Judaica press and some Jewish commentaries. And in the singular sense, for the transgression of my people, he was stricken, KJV and many Christian translations. So the Jewish rabbis teach that YashaYahu was, or Isaiah was referring to YasharEL as Yahuwah's servant, because YashaYahu speaks of YasharEL as his servant continuously from chapters 43 to 53. The 9 verses in question is the Jewish non-messianic who look at these verses as YasharEL is equal to my servant. So the rabbi was making a point saying that the Christians are deceived because he says my rabbi, that is Isaiah or YashaYahu, is talking about YasharEL who is my servant, and these are the verses he refers from. He says that you need to look at the previous verses from YashaYahu chapter 43 onwards, right till YashaYahu 53, that is 10 chapters, all right, where Yahuwah is only talking about his servant. So if you see here, it says, "You are my witnesses," declares Yahuwah, "and my servant whom I have chosen, so that you know and believe and understand that I am He. Before me there was no El formed, nor after me there is none. Right? So you are my witnesses. Okay, it's talking to YasharEL. And my servant, singular, YasharEL. So that's how they interpret. So you can go through these verses, all right. YashaYahu 43:10, YashaYahu 44:1 and 2, YashaYahu 44:2, YashaYahu 45:4, YashaYahu 49 verse 3, YashaYahu chapter 52 verse 13, and this is the verse in question that I'm going to discuss about. So while he is right, it's talking about YasharEL, okay, as his servant, okay. But what he fails to understand is the collective, grammar which we are going to look into. Okay, so here it says he even goes on to quote this verse. He would see the result of the suffering of his life and be satisfied through his knowledge. My righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. YashaYahu 53 verses 11. So he says that if this is determined, that the he over here in YashaYahu chapter 53 verses 8 is YasharEL, who was stricken, all right, and who is a suffering servant. So this verse also means the same, which is verse 11 of YashaYahu chapter 53 verses 11. So firstly, the non-messianic Jews who under their rabbis do not understand the Messiah representation. They fail to realize that Caiaphas, being a high priest that year, prophesied it was better for one man to die for the people, which is a direct quote from YashaYahu 53 verses 8, the verse in question which I am discussing. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. So Caiaphas did it unknowingly, and just as King Saul, who prophesied and was questioned by people whether Saul was among the prophets, but we know later on that he was under divination. All right, so we can understand that this wicked high priest Caiaphas prophesied under divination. John places this in his Bashara uniquely, as this servant of Caiaphas prophesying happened when they plotted against Yahusha to kill him, and when the actual event happened, that is when Yahusha was led to Ananias, John mentions what Caiaphas had prophesied. So we'll read a few verses from John chapter 11 verses 47 onwards. It says, so the chief priest and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? Because this man does many signs. Verse 48, if we let him alone like this, they shall believe him, and Romans shall come and take away from us both our palace and nation. And one of them, Caiaphas, being the high priest that year, said to them, you know not, neither do you consider that it is better for us that one man die for the people than the entire nation should perish. But he did not say this from himself, but by being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahusha was about to die for the nation. Verse 52, and not for the nation only, but to gather together into one the children of Elohim who were scattered abroad. John chapter 18 verses 13 and 14. Now this is the literal thing John places in the Bashara when Yahusha is led to Ananias, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. John says in John 18:13, and they led him away to Ananias first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Verse 14, now Caiaphas was the one who gave counsel or prophesied to the Yehudim that it was better that one man should die for the people. Also, there is an instance in New Testament where a girl possessed by the spirit of divination spoke truth, saying that these men are the servants of the Most High Elohim, who proclaim to us the way of deliverance. You can read that in Acts chapter 16, verses 17 and 18. All right, and Saul, the emissary, rebukes the spirit of divination out of the girl because she daily followed them, saying that these men are the servants of the Most High Elohim, who proclaim to us the way of deliverance. Okay, and the spirit of divination leaves the girl, and the men uh, who had hired this girl used that spirit of divination for profit. All right, they get enraged with Saul. So that is another story. But I'm just telling you how the spirit of divination works in people who do not have the ruach of Elohim and come up with different kind of interpretations. All right, even though they some may even testify that Yahusha is Messiah. All right, but they wouldn't accept his person as Yahuwah himself manifested in the flesh. So, coming back, the Jewish tradition generally rejects the notion of vicarious atonement through one man's death. Isaiah chapter 53 is often read as YasharEL suffering collectively for the nations, not as an individual Messiah. Whereas the Messianics, they see Caiaphas's words as a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 53, the servant Messiah stricken for the sins of the people. So when Caiaphas himself was speaking uh, politically to prevent Roman crackdown, John interprets his words as prophetic, drawing on Isaiah 53 and related Tanakh motives where the suffering of one brings redemption for many. So Caiaphas is Caiapha, all right. So this is his name that is mentioned in KJV. Okay. So now coming back to the grammar of Isaiah chapter 53 verses 8, there are two interpretive paths. One is the collective YasharEL as servant, where we saw the word lamo means to them. The servant represents the people of YasharEL collectively afflicted because of the nation's sins. This fits with other uses of lamo in poetry, where a singular subject is treated as a collective. Secondly, individual. The second interpretive path is individual or messianic reading. Lamo means to him. The servant is an individual, that is Messiah, stricken for the sins of Elohim's people. This reading aligns with Christian interpretation, emphasizing substitutionary suffering. All right, so while Christians translate this as him, okay, where lamo to him, they translate it to him. So, but yet their grammar, the Hebrew grammar that they translate from, all right, they, if you ask a nominal Christian or a common Christian, all right, they wouldn't understand and they would be easily prey to you know such rabbis to fall for them and go back into Judaism. So now let's look at the plural usage of lamo in Tanakh. So now these are the questions, these are the verses in question, all right, where lamo is used as plural. Okay, and later on I will show you, all right, how the deception works in people because they don't read the preceding of the previous verse and also they don't read the context of that verse, all right, of whom it is talking about. So if you read Genesis 9 verses 26, it says, "Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant." Can you see your lamo is mentioned over here? So I've mentioned the Masoretic text over here. So this is the word lamo. Psalms 28 verses 8, Yahuwah is their strength and he is the saving refuge of his anointed. All right, again, their strength, lamo. All right, the same word lamo is used. Psalm 73 verses 10, therefore his people return here and waters of a full cup are drained out to them. All right, again the word them to them is translated from lamo. YashaYahu 44 verses 15, it is worshipped by them. Again by them is the word lamo there. So the grammar indeed shows lamo as translated as their or to them, which is plural, but the rule is also, if you see a singular flow of the verse in Isaiah chapter 53 verses 8, this is very, very important for people to read the verse, all right, the previous context of that verse. If you see here, these are the words mentioned from Isaiah chapter 53 verses 8. Lukak, he was taken, which is a singular or and passive. Doro, his generation, singular, possessive. Nigzar, he was cut off, singular, passive. Meretz Chaim, from the land of the living. All of these clearly point to one individual. Okay, this is the crux of the matter. Only the last word, all right, is lamo. So I see if you hear literal rendering of the verse, all right, only this was upon them. Okay, rest everything his generation. I read out, right, in Hebrew everything is related to a singular individual. All right, only the last part is mentioned to them. So that is where people are not looking at the previous context. Okay, so the puzzle of lamo, the form lamo is poetic form of from lahem, which means to them. The usage in Hebrew poetry, it often appears in places where the subject is singular but represents a collective, that is YasharEL, as one people. In YashaYahu 53 verses 8, grammatically it could mean to them, but contextually it seems to be applied to a singular servant. Okay, this is very important. So now let's read those same verses above in their context to understand the grammar. Okay, remember I read a few verses about Shem and the other verses. Now uh, taking the previous verses, now let's read the same verses, because the problem with the Jewish interpretations of these is they don't look at the earlier verse or earlier markers in that verse. So they come out with the interpretation of a plural. They take literal grammar rendering. This is where we need to be very careful of, because they will only take literal. What they see is what they interpret. All right, is that how scripture is written, or is there ruach also mentioned in the scripture? All right, so they can only see the letter, they can't see the ruach in the letter. So whenever they read a text, a veil is on their heart. So Genesis 9 verses 25 to 26. All right, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Verse 26, and he said, blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant. So the observation here is Shem is named in the singular, but the blessing clearly extends to Shem's descendants, which is a collective. Can you see here? What does it say? Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant. Whose servant? Shem's descendant servant. But Shem is mentioned as singular, and their servant, Lamo, all right, is mentioned over there, showing that the servant Canaan will be the servants of Shem's descendants, which is a collective. So Lamo marks the collective sense. Canaan will be servant to them, that is Shem's line, not just Shem alone. Now let's look at the next verse, Psalms chapter 28 verses 8 to 9. Verse 8 says, Yahuwah is their strength, and he is the saving refuge of his anointed. So the word there is lamo. Okay, and the next verse says, save your people and bless your inheritance, shepherd them also and lift them up forever. So the observation is verse 8 uses lamo, their strength. Verse 9 clarifies who they are. They are Elohim's people, Amak or Amak as they say. All right. So they are Elohim's people. So can you see here? It's collective and singular. Both are mentioned in the verse. So the people are spoken of as one collective unit, but Lamo makes it clear it is plural individuals within that singular people. Psalm 73 verses 9 and 10. Verse 9 says, they set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walks through the earth. Verse 10, therefore his people return here, and waters of a full cup are drained out to them. All right, again the word to them is from Lamo. Okay, so the observation is his people, Amu, is grammatically singular, his people as one unit. Yet Lamo marks it as plural, the people are treated collectively, so the waters are drained out to them. This is a classical case of singular noun, collective plural pronoun. Okay. YashaYahu chapter 44 verses 14 and 15. Verse 14, he cuts down cedars for himself and takes a cypress and an oak. He plants a pine and the rain nourishes it. Verse 15, then it becomes fuel for a man to burn. He takes some of it and warms himself. He makes a god and worships it and bows down to them. Again, the word to them is from the word lamo. So the observation is the idol, all right, which is El, translated as God. Over here, the lower G is singular, but lamo is plural, bows down to them. Why? Because in Hebrew poetry, idols are often treated collectively. All the gods or idols together means they are of the same category. They have eyes but cannot see, ears they cannot hear, mouths they do, have but they cannot speak. Okay, so that's the picture here. So even when one is mentioned, okay, so one tree is cut down and idol is made, but people bow down to them, it says. Okay, so the singular God here represents the collective of idols, hence lamo. So the pattern here, the Hebrew poetry frequently uses lamo when a singular noun is functioning as a collective. So in Psalm 73 verses 10, his people, which is singular, is equal to many individuals. In YashaYahu 44 verses 15, God is singular, the collective of idols. So this explains how in Isaiah 53 verses 8, the servant is singular, could be read as YasharEL collective with lamo marking the plural sense. Alright, we saw the same thing with Shem and Canaan. Let Canaan be their servant. Alright, and we also saw the other verse, okay, Psalm 73 verses 9 and 10. Alright, where a full cup are drained out to them. Alright, referring to whom? It's referring to his people. Okay. Again, we see the singular as well as the collective plural. The collective plural noun, pronoun. So, where were we? Okay, we covered all this. Okay. Okay, so the two interpretive patterns, the collective YasharEL as servant, or let subject, the singular subject, he was taken, he was cut off, is equal to YasharEL spoken of as one servant, lamo to them. So this is the Jewish interpretive pattern, all right, meaning YasharEL as Elohim's servant suffers collectively because of the sins of the nations. This matches other poetic uses of lamo where a singular noun represents a collective. So the servant is cut off and the affliction is upon them, the people of YasharEL. Okay, so the cut off, they translate it as exile and suffering. So this is an absurd interpretation, because if you see, why would YasharEL be cut off for the sins of the nations? They are cut off for their own sins, and that's how the captivities happened for them, isn't it? So see, they even deny their own captivity, that they are sinners and they sinned against Yahuwah, and as a result Yahuwah cast them out. So they say that he was taken means he was cut off and they interpret the collective to the singular, saying that it is YasharEL, them, their nation, YasharEL as a singular, and they are being also spoken as collective. So that is a very absurd interpretation. But when you see about Yahusha as YasharEL's representative, he is a singular subject. All right, the singular subject is Yahusha personally. Okay, Lamor read poetically as singular to him, meaning Yahusha embodies YasharEL, the true son, the faithful servant, and suffers on behalf of the people. Just as Hosea chapter 11 verses 1 says, out of Egypt I called my son, is collective in Hosea but applied individually in Matthew. All right, YashaYahu 53 verses 8 is collective in grammar but applied individually in messianic interpretation. So Yahusha is equal, the one who lives out YasharEl's destiny, bearing the affliction for my people. So the true pattern condensing the grammar, all right, Exodus chapter 4 verses 22 is equal to Elohim's firstborn son, where Yahuwah tells Masha and Aaron to say, and you shall say to Pharaoh, thus said Yahuwah, YasharEL is my son, my firstborn. Hosea chapter 11 verses 1, YasharEL is equal to the son called out of Egypt, applied to Yahusha and Matthew. Hosea 11 verses 1, when YasharEL was a child, I loved him, and out of Mitzrayim I called my son. Matthew says, and remained there until the death of Herod, to fill what was spoken by Yahuwah through the prophet, saying, out of Mitzrayim or Egypt I have called my son. So Isaiah chapter 53 verses 8, YasharEL is equal to servant afflicted to them, applied to Yahusha as a singular servant who embodies YasharEL. So the same hermeneutical move is at work. The text speaks of YasharEL collectively, but the New Testament applies it to Yahusha as a representative of YasharEL, the one who fulfills the nation's calling. Here's a literal rendering of Isaiah 53 verses 8 with the singular flow preserved, while showing how Yahusha is understood as the representative of the collective nation YasharEL. So literal rendering with Yahusha as YasharEL in one, from oppression and from judgment he was taken, and as for his generation, who considered, for he was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgression of my people, the plague was upon them. All right, so how the pattern works, the singular verbs, lukak, he was taken, nigzar, he was cut off, point to one individual. Collective representation, lamo, to them, poetic, plural, signaling that the one servant embodies the many. So interpretation, Yahusha is the singular servant, but he stands as a representative of YasharEL. His suffering is both personal, he was stricken, and collective, the affliction falls upon them through him. Alright? So the verse reads literally as singular, but the poetic lamo shows Yahusha to be seen as YasharEL condensed into one faithful servant, the one who bears the affliction of the many. So here's YashaYahu 53 verses 8 laid out in a copy-friendly dual rendering, showing both the collective YasharEL reading and the representative Yahusha reading side by side in plain text. Alright, no columns, just clear sections. So these are clear sections that I have noted over here. Summary of YashaYahu 53 verses 8. Collective YasharEL reading, from oppression and from judgment he was taken, and as for his generation, who considered, for he was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgression of my people, the plague was upon them. So the interpretation, the servant is YasharEL as one collective. Singular verbs describe YasharEL as one servant. Lamo, to them, marking the plural sense. YasharEL suffers exile and affliction because of the sins of the nations. Alright, so this is the Jewish interpretation. A collective YasharEL, present YasharEL reading, the rabbis reading. And this is the messianic reading, which is Ruach filled. Alright, when I say messianic, I don't refer to Christians, because they are very shallow in their understanding or drilling down into the Hebrew, because these are the messianic who have the Ruach of Yahusha. From oppression and from judgment he was taken, and as for his generation, who considered, for he was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgression of my people, the plague was upon him. Here lamo as poetic singular. So the interpretation is the servant is Yahusha, the true representative of YasharEL. Singular verbs naturally fit an individual. Lamo read poetically as singular applied to Yahusha. He embodies YasharEL's role, bearing the affliction of the many in himself. So the closing summary, YashaYahu chapter 53 verses 8 captures the paradox of the servant, one figure described in singular terms, yet bearing the affliction of the many. In the collective reading, YasharEL is the servant, suffering exile and oppression to them because of the sins of the nation. In the representative reading, all right, Yahusha is the servant, embodying YasharEl's destiny in himself, stricken to them for the transgression of Elohim's people. The poetic use of lamo bridges the two perspectives, allowing the verse to speak both of the nation and of the Messiah, just as YasharEL was called Elohim's firstborn son and Yahusha was called out of Egypt as the true son. So here the servant is both the people and the one who fulfills their calling. In this way, YashaYahu 53 verses 8 becomes a profound testimony to the unity of Scripture, the collective and the representative, the nation and the Messiah joined together in the mystery of redemptive suffering. So many people are following or falling for the collective reading of the rabbis, all right, where he is showing, as I just read over here, in the collective reading, YasharEL is the servant suffering exile and oppression, and the reading is ridiculous because why they are suffering exile and oppression? Because of the sins of the nations, they say, all right, not for their own sins. Whereas we need to thank and be thankful to Yahusha HaMashiach, all right? He is our representation, and because of him taking our suffering upon himself, all right, we realize that okay, the suffering and exile and oppression, all right, of us fell upon him, and by his wounds we are healed, all right. So this is what I wanted to share. So I hope all this makes sense. I pray that you understand the correct perspective and not fall for these kind of rabbis teaching and go into Judaism and into other streams as being Unitarian. All right, stand firm in your belief in Mashiach. May Yahusha Mashiach Baraki.